Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The city of Gainesville and Alachua County, we welcome you. Dr. Sally has already done that, but I will welcome you as well. At this time, we will begin our forum for this evening. And the first on our agenda is our supervisor of elections, Kim Barton. She's going to come out and talk about 10 minutes about voting. Thank you all for being here. The rules are, we're going to give each of you 5 minutes for your opening statement. And we have a timekeeper right up front, which will let you know when your time is up. And then we will have a question and answer session. If you have questions, we have visionaries in the back with cards, and you could get it and pass it up, and we will read your questions. That's about it. So we will start with Harvey Boyd, the mayor.
Good evening, everybody. How we doing? Good. All right. Thanks for spending your time out here. There are lots and lots of things you could all be doing on Monday evening, and I appreciate you spending your time here with us. I want to thank the visionaries and everyone who put this together. I want to thank Williams Temple for giving us the space. And I want to go off topic for 2 items here that are, I think, important to us all. If you would please keep in your thoughts and prayers tonight and for many months to follow. The people of Jamaica and Cuba and Haiti. The tragedy is something most of us in this room probably can't contemplate. So please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. There will be things that we can actually do in the coming days for them, but for now, keep them in your hearts. Similarly, but not quite as destructively, if you would reach out, please, to your members of Congress or your members of the Florida legislature to urge an end to the shutdown before people lose their food, and so that people can start getting paid again. And I ask you to reach out to the members of the Florida legislature because there are emergency funds available, and we want to urge the governor to please release those funds so people can eat. So if you'll do that, please, that would be terrific. I just broke a minute of my time there, I apologize. I want to recognize members of the Gainesville City Commission, and I saw at least one, and the GRU Authority who are with us this evening. I will tell you that I have been reticent to be involved in this sort of thing about this issue because I don't think that, first of all, we voted on this a bunch of times. You know, this is number 3, and I think most people in this room have probably already voted, or you know exactly how you're going to vote. And I'm happy to talk about it, but I want to be real careful. My place in all of this is different than Mr. Bielarski's place. And I'm an elected official. I get to do politics. I kind of have to do politics. Mr. Bielarski is not, so he's limited in the sorts of things he can say. And I don't like being in that uneven space. Regardless, here we are in the space. Let's clear up a few things. The authority was created in June of 2023. It was the bill that created the authority, which changed governance of the utility from elected officials, locally elected officials, to officials appointed by the governor. And let me sidetrack once again and say, currently it's appointed by Governor DeSantis. Everybody on it's appointed by Governor DeSantis. No matter which side of the aisle you fall on, eventually the pendulum swings, and it's going to be a different kind of governor. And I want you to keep that in mind as you go to the polls as well. You may not always like the governor who gets to pick. That's an important thing to think about. I want to mention also, this absolutely should not be the Harvey and Ed show. You should not be, deciding, I like Harvey better, I like Ed better. This is about governance. This is about things that happen long after he and I don't work in the buildings that we work in. long after that. This is something not only next year, 10 years down the road, 50 years down the road. You're making governance decisions for people you don't know yet. And I want you to keep that in mind as we move forward. I'm going to run out of time here, that's for sure. The bill that created the GRU authority, what it did was create Article 7 of the City of Gainesville Charter. That's what it did. One minute, I'm never going to make that up. And that is not the only article in the charter that talks about how we do this process. If you only read Article 7, then yeah, the GRU authority has a point. But you got to read the whole charter. If you read Article 5, particularly Section 01, you'll see how the people of Gainesville, that's most of y'all, get the opportunity to change the charter, your charter for your city. That is why Judge Wright agreed with the city of Gainesville after the GRU authority sued us the first time, that yes, the people should have an opportunity to vote. I believe that people that you select that are known to you locally are going to serve you better than people who are appointed by somebody 150 miles away. I just believe that. I think voting is something we should treasure and we should keep whole and respect. And I think that people who sue you to keep you from voting probably in the long term are on the wrong side of history. There's a whole lot more to say, but that's where we are. Yes, that's true too. The right to manage your own charter, it's called home rule. It is in the Florida Constitution. That's why Judge Wright sided with us at that time around. We'll see where it goes this time. I got to tell you, we've been sued. The City of Gainesville has been sued by the GRU authority twice now to keep you from voting, to keep you from voting. I don't think that's good governance. I just don't. I think it's important that you remember that until 2 years ago, until 2023, you got to pick who made the decisions for your utility if you live in the City of Gainesville. And if you didn't like those decisions, you got to hire and fire new people every time an election came up. This coming year, there are 4 of us on the Gainesville City Commission who are up for re-election. You could choose to fire all of us. You don't get any say in hiring and firing of the GRU authority. That doesn't make them bad people. But it means you don't have any choice in who governs your property. And if you live in the City of Gainesville, GRU is your property. And that's why the election is not open to people who don't live inside the city limits, because the charter and the courts have held that GRU is the property of the city. So it's owned by the people who live inside Gainesville. Now, I think that Gainesville ought to be a lot larger. I think that we should do a lot of annexing, a lot of voluntary annexing. We're not going to bring people in who don't want to be in. But I think if your driver's license says Gainesville, you ought to be a Gainesville resident. But that's a story for another day. For now, people who live inside the City of Gainesville get to vote on it because it's your property. That's why only people who live in the city get to vote on it. There's really a whole lot more we can talk about that, and I'm sure we will. But that's more than enough for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mayor Ward. Mr. Bielarski.
Thank you, Mayor Ward. Thank you. I appreciate the moment. I want to thank the visionaries also for providing this opportunity to talk to the community. I think it's a good thing that we can discuss what we think about the vote and where we stand, and do it in a very civil fashion. So that's why Mr. Ward, Mayor Ward, sorry, had something more to say. I'm happy to go and be able to finish his thoughts. We shouldn't be under this strict time constraint. So what I wanted to start with was this idea, this independent board, the authority, wasn't created in a vacuum. It has a history associated with it. And Mayor Ward did a good job of talking about that history from the time the authority was created, but he didn't talk about what had happened previously to that. So when I came on board as GRU's general manager working for the City Commission back in 2015, they had already set down a path that created some distinct operational financial difficulties for them. They entered into a $2.5 billion biomass power purchase agreement that was stretching the finances of the organization. We needed to get out of that contract. That was one of my tasks, was to do that while I came on board. The other thing is we had a series of solar feed-in tariffs that to this day cost us about $80 million more than what we could have actually created that generating power for. And through this, there were excess transfers that were being made from the utility to the city. What do I mean by excess transfers? Well, in some years, they were actually taking more in a transfer than what GRU made in a profit. So it's not a sustainable situation for the organization. In fact, from 2018 to 2021, there were $68 million more taken from GRU to the city in terms of its profit. So as a result of that, we had 5 downgrades. It was a tough situation at the city, and we had the highest rates in the state. It's within that context that the state decided to intervene. And there have been previous efforts to do that. There was the Perry bill, and then it ended up being the Clemens bill. It was House Bill 1645. So when folks think about the audacity of the state coming in and doing this, they have to understand that the highest rates in the state, we had 5 downgrades. We had a future where we had 5 plants that were over 40 years of age with no ability to really refinance them or to build additional generation. We were really stuck. Now, what helped that was, and I don't want to make this the Harvey and Ed show as well, but the one thing we agree on is the buyout of that biomass plant. The actual PPA saved actually more than $1 billion at this point. Somebody actually called it an audaciously successful deal. So that's where we're at. So what has the authority done since it's taken over? Well, we've reduced the average residential bill from $156 to $137. It's a big deal. A lot of it was based on the reduction in natural gas, which we helped along because we were buying natural gas prepayments to save us $5 million a year. We were able to pay down $176 million in debt over those 2 years, largely on the backs of a lower general fund transfer to the city, which you've all seen in the papers and you've talked about. It creates some burdens at the city. But you can't have a healthy city if you don't have that healthy utility. So the other thing is that we've been supported by all the rating agencies. They've affirmed our rating with a stable outlook. And as a part of not having a downgrade again, they are looking at us to maintain that plan of paying down debt, keeping a lower general fund transfer. I'm done.
Thank you. Let's give them a hand. Thank you. To the audience, if you have questions, we ask that you use one of the visionaries, and they would bring it up. Okay, our first question is for Ms. Bielarski. Typically, utility, public or private, provide return on investment to their ratepayers. What has GRU returned to the citizens of Gainesville who are on GRU?
Thank you for the question. Was that from the audience, by the way?
Yes, all of these came from the
Oh, okay, great. That's a good question because the general fund transfer is really a dividend. We talk about it as the GFT, or we say the GSC, which is, I think, the Government Services Contribution. But as I mentioned, from 2018 to 2021, that dividend was over 100%. In some years, it was 200%. So it was very atypical of what other municipal utilities can do. Nobody would return more in a dividend than what they actually made. In fact, what we found was something on the order of 50% was probably about the highest that you would see when you're looking at a profit for an organization. Now, typically, you don't have municipal utilities that look at profit numbers. It's almost verboten in the industry because it's fund accounting, it's very nuanced. But you can construct a profit for your organization. And GRU did that and compared it to like JPA and the other peer utilities, and we're far in excess of what those dividends were for those organizations. And today, we're paying, moved from paying at a peak $38 million to $8 million.
I think the rules said no rebuttal. Am I correct, Dr. Sal?
Yes, we can address it.
Okay.
Thank you. Just very briefly, transfers in municipal utilities are not necessarily, and very often not thought of as dividends. They are payments in lieu of taxes. If it were an investor-owned utility, what they would be paying in taxes and in user fees and in franchise fees. And by the way, it's not $8 million. It's $8 million minus a number of other things that have been reduced from that, which ends up somewhere in the sixes, I believe. Before the utility existed, the Gainesville City Commission adopted a resolution with a very specific formula that came in on the low end of what the user fees, franchise fees, and taxes would actually be. And that figure for this year would be around $18, $19 million. 6 to 8 million is historically low for any utility of our size that I'm aware of. But for instance, and I'll refer a lot to Tallahassee. Tallahassee is a lot like Gainesville. The governance structure we're looking at is just the same as the one that exists in the city of Tallahassee. And Tallahassee's transfer is about $65 million. Again, it should be thought of as franchise fees and taxes, not as profit dividends, because it's not a for-profit company.
Okay, thank you. This question is for you, Mayor Ward. What has the city of Gainesville received as a return on investment from GRU?
Well, again, it depends on how you think of it. I don't like to think of it in terms of a return on investment. I think of it as, what is the franchise fee? What would a franchise fee reasonably be? What would taxes reasonably be? It has long been a partnership in which there was give and take, and it was, for a while, as high as, I think, $38.3 million a year. It had gone significantly down. It was 32 one year, and then it was at the 16 or whatever that the resolution required that was adopted by the city of Gainesville. By the way, I assume, because the resolution still has the force of law, that this came back to the city of Gainesville, that that resolution would continue to exist and we would use the formula that was already accepted, and which, by the way, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee said was a pretty good idea.
Okay, this question.
Well,
And the reason is we're trying to get through it to as many questions.
I understand.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no. I appreciate that. It's interesting what Mayor Ward said in regard to it going back up. That's the point I wanted to make. I'm not going to go tit for tat with all this kind of stuff. But if we went back to the resolution, we would see it going up from that 8.5. And he's right. We do have numbers that come out of that based on agreements that we have with the city, so we have taken some of those other monies away. but we would be increasing the general fund transfer, which would be in violation of, violation is probably too strong a word, but it would create concern for the rating agencies in terms of us maintaining that same lower general fund transfer. So if they heard this tonight, they would, their ears would perk up and they'd be saying, whoa, wait a second, GRU has less money to spend on its investments to keep lower rates for its customers. They don't want to see that. So,
Okay, let me repeat my question.
thank you.
What have you done differently as manager this time compared to the last time you held that position? Lessons learned.
Yeah, it's probably because of the latitude that I've been given by the authority. We've had a mandate, if you will, to keep rates lower, which has resulted in us being able to go from $156 a month to $137 for an average 1,000 electric residential bill. We've also been able to explore options we couldn't under the commission. We got into the natural gas prepayments where up to 70% of our natural gas purchases are done under a long-term agreement that gives us some really good profitability. It's accruing about $5 million a year to us. That will extend up to 10 years, and then it gets recalculated beyond that. There's a host of things that we're able to do when we're paying down $176 million of debt. So the other extra flexibility is not having that general fund transfer, as Mayor Ward talks about, paid in lieu of taxes. But the point is, none of these other organizations are able to fund that level because GRU's different. It had $2 billion of debt. $2 billion. That's 4 times the amount that is among JEA, Tallahassee, Lakeland, and Orlando municipal utilities. So we were a different animal. You can't look at us like we're a standard being. So under the authority, we're looking at the business differently, and we're trying to become a customer-first organization. And since I took the time before.
Okay, well, this is the second part of your question.
Oh, there's just a
Did
part.
GRU receive any money from the Biden administration infrastructure plan? And if so, how is that money being spent?
They were, I believe you're talking about the ARPA funds. Yeah, we had some of those. Yeah, we actually, let's see, I think they called it a GRIP grant. It was somewhere in the order of $47 million that GRU was, and I wasn't there. This was between the time I left, did my sabbatical, and came back. The folks at GRU under Manager Cunningham and got that award for $47 million. It's in jeopardy right now. Have not heard back from the administration. They're reviewing it. But yeah, under the Biden administration, we got $47 million that was set aside. And we're hoping that that passes through the pipeline at this point. The other thing is that we did work with the city on ARPA money that helped with some of the low-income housing. That's what it was.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I guess this is for both of you. How did it come to be at the state of Florida took GRU and you created a GRUA? Began about the time the state finished its operation and did February 22, 2020.
So the question is,
For both of
how did it get created? I mean, that's a basic history question. It goes back to 2013 or 14 with the initial attempts to have a very different system put together. And by the way, it's a unique system. And sometimes unique is great, sometimes maybe not. There is no other utility in North America that is governed the way this one is. Not one. There are a lot that are governed the way that we're talking about changing it to. Again, Tallahassee is a great example of that. It started again in 2013, 2014. There was a bill that actually went through, and I want to say 2014, that the former governor did not sign. And there was a ballot initiative that the legislature put on our ballot in 2018, and the people of Gainesville said no by about 60%. And then in 2023, with some additional legislative clout by one of our nearby legislators being Speaker Pro Tem of the Florida Legislature, this was pushed through again. I was in Tallahassee for lots and lots of hearings. It was questioned for about an hour once. That was interesting. It was supposed to be 3 minutes. And what are you going to do? So that is the story of how this came to be. There's hours of detail we could put in there, but that's how it got to where it is.
Yeah, I don't think I have a lot to add from what Mayor Ward said, but I would say that there are other utilities in this country that are under financial distress. Municipal utilities, one example, is Trenton Water. In 2020, because of the problems they were having there, the state took over that utility. They're still operating Trenton Water Company, and it's indicative of where GRU was. And that's why there aren't a lot of these circumstances out there, because GRU had entered into a $2.5 billion biomass PPA that was untenable, it was unconscionable, it was an onerous contract. And it put GRU in a whole other situation, $2 billion of debt that it didn't have the resources to pay down, at the same time make general fund transfers. But I think everything else that you're talking about there, Ward is correct.
Okay, thank you. This question is for both of you, and I'm trying to pick the question first that both of our guests will answer. There are quite a few that is directly to one of the other of you, so I'll try to go to the one that applies to both of you and then come back to you.
You're dropping.
Okay. Okay, did the current CEO recommend the city commission purchase the biomass plant at two times its appraised value, thereby incurring over $7 million in debt? And that's
Well, I can answer that. Yeah, I was the general manager at the time we bought the biomass PPA. And what you have to remember was we were buying down $2.5 billion of debt. And we got the biomass plant basically as a throw-in. So we bought a plant and then we paid down the obligation for $750 million. What it did for us is that it ensured that when the lease was over with the biomass contract, we would still have the biomass plant to run. It also got us out of $75 million a year, whether the plant ran or not. Instead, we had debt of $36 million a year, which is a lot of money. And we saved that money. And you know, the appraised value of a transaction where you're buying out debt and getting a power plant in response, as well as that obligation, has little value. We got $750 million of value plus more. And
So I don't, the process there is essentially what Mr. Bielarski described. He was working on that when I was elected to the Gainesville City Commission in 2017. Before I was sworn in as a commissioner, I was in his office and he was explaining how this how this worked, and the only thing I will correct is the numbers. And I got these numbers from Ed back then. $2.1 billion was the lifetime, essentially debt, the lifetime obligation of that PPA, which the deal that we approved in November, December of 2017, that I voted for because it saved us a lot of money, was $1.3 billion, I think. So we saved, with a vote, $900 million. That I heard some folks telling me during that time period, well, just don't pay the debt, it'll go away. People actually gave response, you gotta go do it, you just don't pay it, it'll go away. Now, I don't think either one of us thought that made any sense. And I think there was a unanimous vote to, I don't remember whether it was unanimous or not. I voted for that because it was the right thing to do. It saved all of this $900 million. It was a good choice.
I think there were 2 votes against. No, they weren't yours, and you were supporting.
Okay. This question said, how exactly is increased state involvement helping the citizens of Gainesville and GRU? How is the state involvement helping the citizens of Gainesville and GRU?
The state involvement, I don't know the governor, never talked to the governor. There's very little state involvement. The only thing that I've gotten involved in is whoever they've appointed to the board, which I would mention one of them, Dave Haslam, with his lovely wife, is out in the audience tonight. He's one of the, there's Chip too, but he has a beard. I can't recognize him. So Chip Skinner's out there as well. And these are both folks that are local. They're in the community. Dave's got a scooter business. Chip is a former PI with the city of Gainesville. They're local. We have Eric Lawson, who was the former CEO of North Florida Hospital. He knows a little bit about finance and businesses. We have Jack Jacobs, former Sheriff's Department guy. So they're all local in the community. That's who I deal with. So there's very little that I have to deal with the state.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the board, because that is the state's involvement. The governor chooses who's on the board. There are 5 seats on the board. 5. In less than 25 months, there have been 11 appointments to the board. That is how, and this is not a knock on any individual, it's a knock on the process. That is how tight this process has been. That for 5 members, 5 seats, there have been 11 members in just a hair over 2 years. And right now, there are only 4 members. Because the governor, one rolled off months and months ago, and the governor hasn't gotten around, governor's office hasn't gotten around to appointing anybody else. That's a problem. That's a real problem. That's a problem you will not experience when you elect a board. When you get to hire and fire, there's a very specific process we go through. It's called an election. Every 2 years, you get to pick the people that you think ought to run the utility. And I want to remind you that, some people will say, well, elections don't matter because nobody ever gets elected. Man, back after the biomass original PPA was approved in 2010, which by the way, we got to stop worrying about biomass. It's been 15 years. Yes, there's a lot of debt there, but we have litigated this a lot. And it becomes a shield to keep from talking about the things that are actually going on today. After that PPA was put in place, there was such churn on the city commission because of that issue. For about 5 years, there was a 38% retention rate for incumbents at the Gainesville City Commission. So please don't believe that you, the people, we, the people, will not swap out elected officials if they're not doing the right thing.
Okay, this question is for Ms. Bielarski. If the authority continues to retain control, what is your concrete plan moving forward to both keep rates as low as possible and address GRU outstanding work. Can you outline what steps can be taken?
Sure. I would say that that's something that the rating agencies are very familiar with. We've made them very keen on what is our plan moving forward. I think I mentioned it before, but it's worth repeating. We're keeping the general fund transfer at its low level. They like that because that frees up more money to pay down debt. We're looking to pay down, as I said, we paid down $177 million since October 1st of 2023. We're looking to pay down over $400 million over that 10-year period starting in 2023. Along with that, we're trying to keep base rates as low as possible. Part of what we did in that regard was when I came on board, we really looked at our operating expenses. We looked at our CapEx, which is capital expenditures, our plant and equipment. We took $5 million immediately out of our operating budget in 2025. And in that same year, we took $20+ million out of capital expenditures. They were in areas like replacing the carpet in the GRU building. Pretty nice carpet. I thought it was just fine, just needed to clean it a little bit. We looked at different expenditures, across the organization. We're right down now to the lowest employee level that we've had in 15 years. A part of that has been right-sizing the organization. So we're literally down under 800 employees at the present time. Productive, efficient, and it's driving costs down. And that's what we intend to do. That's our plan.
Thank you, Mayor Ford. Okay, well, that's a good question I can answer that.
Thank you. There are a number of other issues there. And I really, that's why I want to really do this, because this should not be about Ed and Harvey. But here we go anyway. Because it needs to be. Ed was general manager from 2015 until 2022. Those staffing levels could absolutely have been reduced at any point. Those capital expenditures could have changed. But it's important to talk about capital expenditures at this point because it's not all about carpet. I mean, we know that. Come on, we don't have billions of dollars worth of carpet. When you're not investing in the utility that you own, you're not investing in the things that make energy, the water plants, when you're not investing in water and wastewater and keeping up the capital that you own, you run risks with that. Now, the person who taught me that was Ed Bielarski. Ed always told us when he made the rounds before we did our before we brought the budgets forward, we have to stay on top of capital expenditures. We have to stay on top of capital expenditures. Apparently, that has changed. Yes, you can pay that down faster if you don't pay capital expenditures. If you don't take good care of the power generation that you all own, if we don't take good care of the facilities, you're going to have more expenses later. So what this does is kick it down the road some pace. Either that or somebody wasn't being honest with the people who were making the decisions prior to that. I never once heard anyone at the Gainesville City Commission say, make sure you don't let staffing levels go below this level. Now, yes, we want to employ as many people as we can efficiently. We want things to be operated efficiently. But we generally voted on what our general manager, one of two of them, said were important to vote on. That's a reality. You can go back and watch video of all those meetings if you'd like to, because I don't understand how suddenly it became good to have the lowest staffing levels ever, because the debt didn't just pop up. I mean, it was there from 2015 forward. And I think it's important to point all that out. So, thank you.
We have a few minutes left because I didn't answer them. So what's really interesting about what Mayor Ward is saying is that during the period I was there, under the city commission, we were somewhere around $90 million in CapEx. When I left and we came back, it was 150. So taking 20 out of 150 got us still way above where we were, but it was more prudent to look at it that way. People forget that when I was here the first time at 1.0, I was the guy that got rid of coal use at GRU's Deer Haven facility. We converted it to natural gas. We also upgraded Kelly so it had another 30 years of life. And we did that for a total cost of $30 million. We did, I can't even include myself in there. The folks that we had working at GRU did a wonderful job of doing that. That's smart infrastructure. But the fact of the matter is, by the time I got back, the infrastructure numbers, CapEx, were up 60%. And that's way too high.
Okay, next, and we're kind of winding down with our 30-minute question. So the timekeeper will let us know when we're about there. This question is, what is happening to the profit that was formerly being transferred from goods of the goods of the citizens? What's happening to the profits that were formerly being transferred to the citizens?
It sounds like you're asking now, we've had a peak of $38 million we were paying, and now we're paying $8, as the mayor said, sometimes lower than that because of some contracts. So that differential, that $30 million, is going right to pay off debt. Paying off debt. We got a credit card, it's up to $2 billion, we're paying it off, paying it off, paying it off.
So the number has changed a number of times, the debt number. It used to be 1.7 or 1.8, and now it's a couple $100 million here, a couple $100 million there. You're talking about real money pretty soon. I'm sure that much of the difference, much of that $30 million a year is probably going toward debt. But I heard a figure of $176 million that have been paid off. And that's terrific. But keep in mind, that means that about $116 million of that is money that was not being spent on the facilities that we already own. And debt is important to pay down. But you got to make sure you're taking care of the facilities as well. And maybe we are, but maybe we're not.
This question I asked, what will the city of Gainesville do to ensure affordable energy for low-income members of our community?
So the city of Gainesville over the past few years has focused, past 2.5 to 3 years, we have focused primarily on building new affordable housing in this community. We're up to almost 800 homes, whether those be apartment homes or single-family homes. We used a variety of sources to do that, to approach affordability very directly, because we were thousands of units behind, as most of America is. There's not a city in America that doesn't have a very serious housing affordability crisis. So we used any means available, including ARPA funds and other things, to get affordable housing built. And again, we have built or in the middle of building in the city of Gainesville. I can't speak to Alachua County, but in the city of Gainesville, almost 800 already, and we've got more things in the works. One of the ways that we were able to do that over the years was using funds from GRU water, from New Build It, from Connect Free, which was taken from rates that, fees that were being paid in the county to build new affordable housing. That's been a constant income stream, but it's not there anymore. That was shut down a couple of years ago by the authority. One of the benefits of that, in addition to affordability, was that it created new meters for GRU to build. It had new customers, and that stream is gone at this point. Will we find other ways to approach affordability? Absolutely we will. But for now, Connect Free is gone, and we're spending down a lot of stuff to get a place to build for people.
fee on new connections in the county that went to the city to only be spent on reconnecting folks. And it was meant really to take people off sewage, septic, and it was converted, I think at the end of my time there, maybe the beginning of Tony's, so that it went toward affordable housing. And it wasn't part of House Bill 1645 to have the county residents subsidize the city residents. So that was the basis for it. But aside from that, I understand what the mayor was talking about.
Okay, according to our timekeeper, we have reached that point that this time we'll give the mayor and Mr. Bielarski proposal statement of request.
Is that, I'm here with Mayor. Mayor and I are having differences of opinion. We're doing it civilly. We're talking about the issues. It's not politics of personal destruction. And that's what our society is all based on. We can disagree with certain elements of what's going on. That's really, really important. That's what makes me feel very, very special to me. So I would just like to reiterate some of the things that the authority has done, for the community. It's given them a more business-like approach. It's reduced the general fund transfer, and put that money to use in paying down debt. It was much needed for the finances of GRU. 3 rating agencies, S&P, Fitch, and Moody's, all agree that the plan moving forward is absolutely the way we should go. We want to keep the general fund transfer low. We ought to continue paying down that debt and keep rates competitive. And that's what we're trying to do. When we were the highest in the state back in March of 2023, we were at $182 for an average residential bill. We're at $136 now. And number 14 in the state. We haven't been that low on the totem pole. So think about it. We're within $4 or $5 from having the average electric price in the middle of the state. And by the way, it's cheaper than Clay Electric. Cheaper than Clay.
So here, as we wrap up, your water bill just went up. We talk a lot about electricity. That's pretty much all we talk about in these discussions. I think a lot more about water. Somebody will sell us power. If our water goes bad, if our water system goes bad, we got a problem. I don't think nearly enough attention is being paid to that. Your water bill and your wastewater bill just went up. And I think it's important to note that. We talk a lot about affordability. If you use more than 1,400 kilowatt hours a month of electricity, by the way, a few months ago your rate went up. So it's all about how you play with the numbers, I guess, but the reality is that. Now, it is also true that lots of utilities around the state have raised their prices a lot. The Public Service Commission allowed FPL, many of them to really raise quite a bit. But all of that is about today. This should not be about today. What we need to be thinking about is, what do you want the governance of this utility to be tomorrow, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now, and 50 years from now? For 100 years or more, you elected and you got to hire and fire the people who ran this utility. You don't get to do that today. That is wrong. If you live in the city of Gainesville, you own this utility, and you ought to have a say in who manages it. You don't get to do that right now. Now, if you live outside the city of Gainesville, can you participate in city elections? You can't vote, but can you participate? You bet you can. A bunch of you are tonight part of this process. Many of you participate in city elections in many ways, financially, through coming to forums, through organizing forums, through talking to your friends, through putting signs up. And if you don't believe that that is participating in an election, you probably haven't won the elections. It matters that you have a say in this, and right now you don't. Please vote yes. I think it's important that you do.